Salam, peace be upon you. Part 38. Extensionality, encoder complete equivalence. No observational difference, no scientific difference. Salam, peace be upon you. In part 37, we installed a hard rule that sounds simple but changes everything. Science is not what someone claims to have seen. Science is what survives reconstruction. A fact becomes public only when someone else, far away, later, with different hands and a different mind, can follow the comparator steps and get the same kind of result. Today, in part 38, we install an even sharper firewall. Because once you accept reconstruction, a new question becomes unavoidable. If two different stories produce the same reconstructed outcomes, what exactly is the scientific difference between them? And the answer is the rule that slices through thousands of debates like a clean blade. If two models produce identical licensed encoder outputs across all licensed windows, they are empirically identical. No hidden essence behind the measurements is scientifically admissible. That is not a small claim. It is the most operational sentence we have spoken so far. And if you carry only one sentence from this part, let it be. No observational difference, no scientific difference. And as always, the formal mathematical works behind these ideas can be found on Zenodo by searching for Holophase. Now let's make this real. The two clocks. Imagine two clocks hanging on a wall. Clock A is a masterpiece of gears and springs. You can hear it tick. If you open the back, you see tiny wheels turning like a city at night. Clock B is a silent digital box. A quartz crystal, a circuit board, a sealed interior you are never allowed to open, ever. Now here is the strange miracle. These two clocks show exactly the same time. Not close, not almost, exactly. Every second, every minute, every day, every year. You can test them in every way a user can test clocks. Check them at random times. Same. Compare them against the sunrise. Same. Compare them against an atomic time broadcast. Same. Set alarms. They ring at the same instant. Time a race. Same duration. Leave them for a decade. Same drift. None. But you are forbidden from opening clock B. You will never see what's inside. Now answer carefully. Is there any scientific difference between these clocks? Many people instinctively want to say yes. They want to say, clock A is really mechanical, clock B is really electronic. Clock A has an escapement, clock B has a chip. Clock A ticks, clock B doesn't. But those are not scientific differences, unless they create differences in what the clocks output into the world. Because science can only work with what can be observed, compared, and reconstructed. If every observable output is identical, then any claim of a deeper difference becomes a private belief about the sealed interior. You may prefer one story. You may find one more beautiful. You may feel one is more real. But science does not run on preference. Science runs on reconstructible outputs. So for science, clock A and clock B, if they are perfectly encoder identical, are the same clock. That is part 38. What we mean by encoder. The word encoder can sound technical, so let's make it plain. An encoder is simply the translator between reality and what we can publicly read. Your eye is an encoder. It turns light into nerve signals. A thermometer is an encoder. It turns heat into a number. A microphone is an encoder. It turns air pressure into voltage. A particle detector is an encoder. It turns invisible collisions into tracks and pulses. A survey form is an encoder. It turns private states into public marks on paper. And the licensed encoder is one that passes all the firewalls we already installed. It lives in a declared window, part 32. It crosses the coherence threshold gamma. It respects finite access. It carries uncertainty and scope. It depends only on finite jets, finite derivative content. It is reconstructible through public comparator procedures. So when we say encoder complete, we mean this. If two models produce the same outputs for every licensed encoder in every licensed window, then no experiment can tell them apart. And if no experiment can tell them apart, then they are not two scientific theories. They are two stories about one identical empirical machine. The courtroom that forbids whispers. Let's turn this into a story you can feel in your bones. Imagine a courtroom. The case is the most important case that can exist. What is true about the world? The judge is the public. The jury is time. The lawyers are theories. Evidence comes in as measurements, numbers, signals, images, graphs, patterns. But there is a rule in this courtroom. No whispers are allowed. A whisper is any claim that cannot be brought into evidence through a public procedure. A whisper is, I know what's really behind the clock, but I can't show you. I sense a deeper layer, but it never shows up in measurements. My theory is truer, but it predicts the same outputs forever. The judge says, that may be your inner world, but it is not evidence. Only what can be reconstructed through shared comparator chains can enter the record. So the courtroom asks every theory one thing. Show me what you predict the encoder will output. Then it asks, show me how others can reconstruct that output. Now imagine two theories walk in. Theory 1 says, reality is gears. Theory 2 says, reality is circuits. The judge turns to the evidence. Every measurement, every test, every observable output is identical under both. The judge asks Theory 2, do you have any evidence that differs? Theory 2 says, no, but I insist the inner mechanism is different. The judge says, then your difference is a whisper. It cannot be admitted. That is part 38. Not because science hates metaphysics, not because metaphysics is wrong, but because science has a job, to build public knowledge. And public knowledge is built only from what enters the record through reconstruction. The Mapmaker's War. Now let me show you why this matters in the real world. Two teams are sent to map an island. Team Alpha uses satellites and radar. They never touch the ground. Team Beta walks the island for months. They sweat, climb, measure with instruments, and mark the terrain by hand. Both teams return. They unroll their maps. And the maps are identical. Every river bend, every contour line, every ridge, every bay, every trail. But a war begins. Team Alpha says, our map is truer because it came from above. Team Beta says, our map is truer because we touched the ground. And the island itself, silent, does not speak in their debate. A wise person steps in and says, if the maps are identical, then as maps, they are the same. Choose the one you like. But don't pretend the argument is scientific unless it changes where the map sends you. Team Alpha's pride is not a measurement. Team Beta's suffering is not a measurement. The method matters only insofar as it changes outputs. If both methods yield the same licensed outputs in all licensed windows, then empirically, they are the same map. This is the extinction of hidden superiority. You can't claim scientific advantage from invisible essence. Two painters, one painting. Now imagine two paintings. Painting one is made by a famous artist. Years of suffering, a lifetime poured into each stroke. Painting two is made by a perfect machine that can copy painting one down to the smallest detail, molecule by molecule, pigment by pigment, under every scientific tool. The pigments match. The canvas fibers match. The brushstroke microstructure matches. The chemical signatures match. The aging patterns match. They are physically identical. Now the art world will fight forever about authenticity. And that fight may matter to the soul, to culture, to value, to meaning. But science has no lever to separate them. If all licensed encoders produce identical outputs, then science cannot declare a difference. This is not an insult to art. It is an honesty about what science is. Science is not the guardian of meaning. Science is the guardian of publicly reconstructible difference. The library argument that never ends. Let's return to the infinite library from part 34. Imagine two librarians. Librarian X says, "The library's order is divine." Librarian Y says, "The library's order is accidental." Now here is the key. Whenever you ask for a book, whales, poems, history, both librarians give you the same shelf number, the same catalog entry, the same results. Their catalogs are identical across every query you can make. Now ask, is there any scientific difference between divine order and accidental order if the catalog outputs never differ? No. Those are metaphysical interpretations sitting behind identical encoder outputs. They may matter to philosophy. They may matter to religion. They may matter to existential meaning. But they are not scientific differences unless they cash out into different outputs under some licensed window. Otherwise, they are whispers in the courtroom. Why this principle is not anti-reality. At this point, some listeners get nervous. They hear outputs only, and they think we are saying, nothing exists behind measurement. Reality is only data. Only what we observe is real. No, that would be a category error. Part 38 is not denying depth. It is denying licensed authority to depth claims that never manifest. Reality may have infinite depth. We already said phi has bottomless descriptive potential. But science is not a metaphysical microscope that pierces the veil. Science is a public discipline that certifies claims through reconstruction. So part 38 is not saying there is nothing behind the shadow. It is saying if the shadow never changes, then no scientific statement can be made about differences behind it. The mountain may have infinite grains of sand, but your map, your public object, must be finite and shareable. If two mountains cast the same shadow under every possible lighting arrangement you can ever test, then for the public domain, they are the same mountain. Maybe they are not identical in some absolute God view, but science does not operate from God view. Science operates from licensed windows. The prediction. Now we install the prediction at the heart of the firewall. Prediction. Any untestable difference remains forever outside science. That means, if you propose a deeper layer that produces no observational difference across all licensed encoders and windows, then your deeper layer cannot ever become science. Not today, not with better instruments, not in 1,000 years. Because the issue is not technology. The issue is definitional. Science is the domain of operational difference. No operational difference, no scientific difference. This prediction also implies something practical. If a field is filled with debates that never touch different measurements, it will remain permanently stuck in interpretive noise, philosophy disguised as lab talk. The only way it becomes science is by producing a prediction that changes what encoders output. The falsification challenge. Now let's be honest. A principle this strong needs a clear falsification. Falsification condition. Present two theories with identical licensed encoder outputs across all licensed windows that nevertheless differ in a scientifically meaningful way. In other words, find a difference that is both scientifically meaningful and provably never shows up in any measurement. That is already suspicious because scientifically meaningful means changes what we can test. But let's attempt it. Attempt 1. This universe is deterministic. That universe is fundamentally random. If both generate identical probability distributions for all measurements, then no experiment can separate them. So under this principle, there is no scientific difference. The difference is metaphysical. Attempt 2. Interpretations of quantum mechanics. Some interpretations claim identical predictions for all experiments. If that remains true forever, if not one licensed encoder output differs, then they are scientifically the same theory, and the interpretation is a metaphysical overlay. But if an interpretation produces even one distinct, reconstructible, repeatable difference, then it becomes a scientific competitor. Part 38 does not choose interpretations. Part 38 tells you the price of entry. Different outputs or remain philosophy. Attempt 3. The world was created last Thursday with all memories preloaded. If it produces the same evidence, same fossils, same cosmic signals, same lab results, then it is scientifically equivalent to the standard historical model because no experiment can separate them. Again, not false, but untestable, therefore outside science. So where is the falsifier? To falsify part 38, someone must show that two theories can be forever observationally identical, and yet science can still meaningfully prefer one on empirical grounds, not on beauty. Not on simplicity, not on culture, on empirical grounds. And if the grounds are empirical, they must show up in encoders. So the falsification challenge is very stiff, which is exactly why this is a strong firewall. The hidden trap this firewall prevents. Now let's name the danger part 38 is designed to stop. It stops the endless move people love to make. The mainstream theory explains the data, but my theory explains the same data more deeply. If more deeply does not change any licensed encoder output, then it is not a scientific improvement. It is a poetic improvement, a metaphysical preference, a spiritual story. Again, it might be valuable, but it is not science. This firewall prevents science from dissolving into infinite hidden layers. Because if you allow hidden essence differences with no output differences, there is no stopping point. Someone can always say, no, behind your hidden layer, there is a deeper hidden layer. Behind that, another. Forever. Science would become a hall of mirrors. Part 38 breaks the mirrors. It says, if the mirrors never change what you can measure, the mirrors do not belong to science. How this connects to everything we built. Now watch how cleanly part 38 locks into the structure of parts 32 to 37. Part 32. Windowed locality. Claims live inside finite windows. Extensionality compares models within those windows. Part 33. Coherence threshold gamma. Below gamma, outputs are noise. Above gamma, outputs are licensable. Extensionality only compares licensed outputs, not noise fantasies. Part 34. Finite access. We extract finite statements from infinite depth. Extensionality uses those finite statements as the full public content. Part 35. Estimation discipline. Outputs must carry uncertainty and scope. Extensionality compares outputs with their error bars, not absolute fantasies. Part 36. Finite jet sufficiency. Observables depend on finite derivatives, not infinite towers. Extensionality is therefore finite jet. It compares what can actually be reconstructed. Part 37. Public comparator axiom. Knowledge is reconstructible comparison. Extensionality says, if the reconstructed comparisons match everywhere, the theories are empirically the same. So part 38 is not an isolated philosophical slogan. It is a consequence of everything we already installed. Once you accept public facts are reconstructible outputs, extensionality is inevitable. The deep peace this principle brings. There is something emotionally calming about part 38, because it ends a certain kind of intellectual suffering. It ends the obsession with invisible superiority. It tells you, if two models predict the same measurements everywhere, you do not need to fight about which one is more real as a scientific question. You can hold your preferences gently. You can say, I prefer this interpretation because it is elegant. I prefer that one because it is intuitive. I prefer this one because it fits my metaphysics. But you also say, I will not pretend my preference is a scientific victory unless it changes a test. This brings peace because it separates domains cleanly. Science for operational differences, philosophy for meaning behind identical operations, art for value and intention, ethics for how we ought to live. Part 38 is not reductionism, it is boundary discipline. A short everyday test you can use. Here is how to apply Part 38 in daily life, not just in physics. Whenever someone offers a grand claim about health, finance, psychology, society, ask one simple question. What observable difference does your story make? Not, how deep is it? Not, how beautiful is it? Not, how confident are you? But, what would we see differently tomorrow if your claim is true? If the answer is, nothing observable changes, then it is not a scientific claim. It may still be meaningful, but it is not testable. If the answer is, we would see X instead of Y under these conditions, then it enters the scientific arena. Now it can be reconstructed, compared, tested, refined. The carry. Now I will give you the memory hook again, and I want it to land like a stamp. No observational difference, no scientific difference. Two clocks that output identical time are scientifically the same clock. Two maps that match perfectly are scientifically the same map. Two theories that output identical licensed encoder readings across all licensed windows are empirically identical. And that means, the moment someone says, but behind the measurement it's different, you calmly ask, where does the difference show up? If they cannot answer, then the difference is outside science. The bridge to part 39. Part 38 does something powerful. It collapses hidden essence talk into silence, unless it pays with predictions. And once you accept that, a new pressure appears. Because if only outputs matter, then adding extra machinery that never changes outputs is not just unnecessary, it is a liability, it is clutter, it is smuggling. So part 39 arrives as the next seal: parsimony constraint. Before dynamics, before story, before extra primitives, keep only what is needed for licensing. If it makes no observational difference, it has no scientific right to exist inside the model. But that is the next part. For now, hold the firewall we installed today. Public science does not see hidden essence. Public science sees reconstructed encodings. And if the encodings do not differ, science does not differ. End of part 38. Salam. Peace be upon you.